I had a dream that I died, and I'm looking down at my funeral, and there's nobody there. What kind of a life am I living that nobody would show up at my funeral?
This is the Lost Child Podcast, where we dive into the topic of losing a child. We have a guest with us today, Doug, and he's going to share a little bit about his story and where he's at right now. First off, thanks, Doug, for being here. I appreciate it. And you lost a child. Can you tell us what his name is?
Joel Nelson.
Joel Nelson.
Yeah.
And is there anything that you kind of like remember about Joel? What were some of like your favorite memories about him?
He was a sweet kid. But he was his father's son, so that means he had his ornery side too. He was a sweet kid. And he liked friends. He had a lot of friends. I remember one night coming home and Lisa says, "You have to see this." And here they had all piled into his room, and there was like 8 guys lined up lengthways on the bed, and they were just all asleep just looked like little mummies all stuck in there together. And it was just, that's the kind of guy that he was. Just always had friends around him and always talking to people. And he was a sweet guy. So
nice. Your wife said the same thing, that he was just a nice, kind of gentle person. That's cool that he had a bunch of different friends, or at least he, I guess, not acquired, but he gained a bunch of different friends, it seems like, based off of just his attitude and personality.
And we're still good friends with those boys, those kids. So
that's awesome. What was one of your favorite memories with Joel?
You know, we had a pumpkin farm at one time, and when they were little kids, because I wanted them to work, but I was working here in Phoenix, and so Lisa would take them down to Benson every week, and that's where they'd stay for 1 or 2 weeks at a time, and they'd move pipe and we'd plant pumpkins, and it was just fun being and working around the kids when they were doing that, and he didn't like it very much, but it's what parents do, is have their kids work, and I enjoyed that a lot.
What was kind of his personality, if you were to describe his personality?
Well, being one of your kids there, he could either be just as great a kid as you, willing to do anything that you'd ask, to rebelling at the same time. He was still just
That's every kid, though, right?
Yeah, it's every kid.
It's both ends of the spectrum there.
Yeah, so, but I don't know. I was dad. I was working all the time, and where moms get to catch all the sweet stuff all the time, the flowers and stuff like that. And so, when he was older, he was sweeter, I think.
Were there any activities, being the dad, were there any activities that you really liked doing with him?
Yeah, he loved camping. He loved being out and doing stuff and camping, and we did a lot of that.
Nice. Do you have a favorite memory of camping with him?
He would like to be. I think that we listened to a lot of Audible books at our house, and I think he would have liked to have been like Jubal Sackett or you'll cut that and make that
You're fine.
work.
Yeah,
You're good.
Yeah, no, that's good.
What's one of the other favorite, Jedediah Smith or something like that. He would have loved to have been out in the wilderness just doing that, and kind of he'd bring plant books and stuff like that whenever we'd go, and he loved that. So
awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about how he died?
Well, he'd been sick. He had a little bit of sickness, but he was working and going to school, and then he had pneumonia, but something ruptured in his lungs, and he bled to death in his bed. It was kind of tragic. It was to Lisa, it was horrifying to find her. And that I was talking to you earlier, but that's one of my regrets in life is not going in there earlier and waking him up and getting going. But he came in late, and I just didn't get a chance to. I didn't do it, you know. And
What were some of the details that you can tell us of that day, like of where you were at and like how you found out and some of those things?
you know, I had left. I was spraying olive trees. We just started a business, 3 years before that, and I was out spraying olive trees, and I was just getting there, and Lisa called me, and she's just frantic and screaming, and I was like, what? And I knew instantly before it even came out of her mouth. I knew what it was. And I got in the truck and I left, and I was driving way too fast, and I just stopped and I slowed down, and I said a little prayer, and I said, let me drive home safely.
Yeah.
We don't need to cause another horrific incident. And so I just slowed down and made the trip probably just as fast as I would have trying to speed. But I remember that specifically of telling myself, slow down, Doug. Don't be another accident here. And when I got home, there were ambulances and everything were there, and she had ran down to our next door neighbor Chris, and that it was on his birthday, and he always says something every once a year when that happens, and but it was just one of those things that just brings back a lot of memories, that when I came in there,
Yeah.
And on my way home, I had called our bishop and our pastor and talked with him, and told him that Joel had just died, and he was there within 2 or 3 minutes.
Wow.
After I got there, and when someone dies in your house, it's a crime scene.
Yeah.
And there were police and firefighters and detectives, and they were all in the house there. And I remember Corey Farley, the bishop, coming in, and I called it the power of the priesthood, because he walked up to and the sheriff's department was there, the Peoria Police Department, and the fire department. And there was 50 people in the house there. And he said to the sheriff's department, he said, "Who's in charge here?" And he says, "You can stay, and the rest of the men out of the house." He went to the police department and said, "Who's in charge?" "You can stay. I want the rest of the men out of the house." He went to the fire department and said, "Who's in charge?" "You can stay, but I want the rest of the men out of the house." And they were looking at him like,
Who are you?
"Who are you?" And I think that any preacher or any pastor or anybody that has a parish or a church congregation, that's their priesthood responsibility, that they have control of those situations. But they obeyed him, and they walked out. And I was like, wow. And that was step one for the power of the Lord in my mind. Step one, that the power of the Lord was in charge of what was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, that I didn't even think about that with it being like a crime scene. You're already going through trying to figure out like what the heck happened, and then you're having all these people over at your house. Like that's something that would be really difficult, I feel like.
Yeah.
How did you and your family cope with the loss, like initially?
I think we still are. you know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, like, initially-
what was like the immediate
Yeah.
aftermath? Like, how did you guys cope with that? Like what, like right then, like right when it happened, right?
Yeah. You know, one of the things it was because Corey was there, my friend Brian Purdyman was there,
And who's Corey?
Corey Farley. He
Oh,
was
okay,
he was our
yeah, yeah.
bishop.
Okay.
And you know, they gave us all a blessing right then. And I said that, and I've said it many times, that the Spirit came upon our home, and it was very comforting. I mean, there was this tragedy here, but the Spirit was so strong in our home that I coped by people coming and seeing me
Mm-hmm.
and talking to me. And our house wasn't quiet for 2 and 3 days at all. Just people coming by and hugging us and telling us they were sorry, you know, and that's how I coped with it.
Did
Lisa
your
would-
wife ever get overwhelmed with the amount of people coming over then?
A lot of times she would go back. I mean, she would go to her room or something like that, you know. The kids were dealing with, you know, they were dealing with it. Amy was just dating a guy and they were almost engaged, you know, so she coped with it her way, you know, and Tyler and Bryce just had a smile on his face, and I don't know. I don't know how to continue answering that.
No,
That's
fine.
fine.
Part of it is just wanting to understand, like right at the very, like right when it happened, kind of like how it laid out, you know. That was at least some of what we were going. So I think you did a great job, like letting us know.
So interesting though, like you said, you could feel like so much spirit in the home. Did you not feel numb then? Like you could still feel certain things?
You know, I believe that the power of the Holy Ghost descends upon you, and I don't know how you guys felt when Sonny died, but it's like this numb state of you'll deal with this in a little bit. I'm gonna let you deal with all you can right now, but it was like this spiritual numbness that you didn't. I didn't have to deal with it all today.
Yeah.
I definitely felt that numbness. I don't know if I would describe it in the same way as you. Mine was more, I didn't feel bad and I didn't feel good either. I was just like, I was kind of sensory overload, or your wife described it as numb. She just couldn't feel good or bad. It was just this, that I definitely felt that, where I was just numb.
How did you feel, Camille?
Same, numb. Couldn't really feel anything.
Yeah, and you probably still are quite a bit, aren't you? I think it probably took me 6-8 months before. How long has it been for you guys?
4 months.
Almost.
4 months.
Yeah, almost.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so people probably think we're crazy already doing something like this.
No, in fact, I was talking with Lisa, and I said, I think this is the way you guys are partly dealing with some of this, is by facing it. How did these guys deal with it?
Well,
I think it takes a lot of courage, and
selfishly, yes, it is I want to be able to see other people's stories and understand, like, how did you cope with the immediate aftermath and some of these other questions we'll get into, but it's like, I want to learn from your story and be like, if there's anything that I can then implement into my life based off of the things that you went through, then like selfishly, that's going to help me. Right. Unselfishly, I think to like all the viewers and everybody that's listening that then maybe they can glean stuff from your story or stuff from our story and be able to say, oh, maybe I should try this. Maybe I should do that. Maybe I should, not be as prideful here. And maybe this is, oh, they felt numb too. Awesome. Well, how did they make it so they didn't feel numb? And how long did that take? And just some of those things, and also be able to relate to somebody that is going through a similar experience, even though your experience is different and my experience is different. And even if we went through the exact same experiences, it would still be different because you're you, Doug, and
Right.
I'm me, Blake, and I'm just different than you.
And Lisa and I's experience were totally different. So,
Yeah.
We're two different people.
right. Yeah. It's dealing with people's sometimes stupid remarks always kind of get me, you know. And
There were a lot, but other people right when it happened said, just so you know, people are going to say a lot of dumb stuff. And so for me, whenever somebody would say something dumb, I would always just look at it as like, they don't know what to say and they love me.
right.
That's the way that I tried
That's
to
good.
take it. And so I actually never got offended by anything anyone said, even though I could be like, well, that's kind of like out there, or that was pretty dumb, or whatever. I was never like, I don't like you because you said that. I was kind of like, it just kind of took me by surprise a little bit, but I was always I tried to take it in the way of, they love me and they don't know what to say.
Yeah. Camille, how about you?
I think pretty much the same, because we had lots of people, like you said, tell us to just give other people grace, and especially each other grace too, because we could also say stupid things to each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this next question deals with the grief cycle. It's not necessarily like a linear thing. I hope at some point we can have like a little graphic that you could hold in your hands and we can be like, hey, here's the cycles or the stages of grief that goes in a cycle. It's always in like a circle. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to go from one phase to the next phase to the next phase. You kind of jump all over. And it's not like you go through it one time and then all of a sudden you're like ridded of your grief, or like solved of your grief or whatever. It's honestly something you're probably still going through, and you still have places that you go into it right now. But some of those, because I need to read them off so I make sure I get them all. So the question is, did you notice any stages of grief? And I'll explain the cycles of grief. So a couple that are in there: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Did you experience any of those stages of grief within kind of the aftermath of Joel's passing?
A little bit of anger,
Yeah.
not so much with God, but he had some friends and they could get doing stupid stuff. And I called up one of his friends, and I was that morning, and I was livid, and I told him Joel's dead, and I said, if you guys were doing anything, I'm gonna rip your head off. And no, he's good. And I was just mad. I was just mad.
Mad at the situation.
Mad at the situation. And the blessing did more for me than anything. It helped me calm down, and 2 days later I called him and I said, hey, could you be one of Joel's pallbearers at his funeral? Yeah. And he didn't own a white shirt, and he looked rough, and he came over and I gave him a white shirt, and it turned out really good. But that was my moment of madness.
Yeah.
There.
And then, for instance, some of the other ones that are in there are like denial. That's the like, there's no way that this is happening. There's no way that this is real. Those are some of those types of thoughts or those feelings. Did you experience anything like that?
I didn't, not so much. Maybe in that moment of numbness, like maybe tomorrow I'll wake up and this will just be a really bad dream or something. But never did.
And then the bargaining stage that it talks about, that one's more like even bargaining with God or something, like, if I would have done X, then like Joel could have been saved. Like if I would have gone to the hospital with him, if I would have woken him up that morning, if I would have, like, you go into all these, if I would have done this, I could have saved it.
Yeah. That's that point of being a better parent all the time. If I'd have, I have one thing that he'd called the house and I'd answered the phone and he said, I'm working tonight at Campbell's and I'm doing this. I'm at school and I'm at school right now. I'm going to work tonight. And then when I'm through, I'm going to go out and see my friend. And I said, okay, just be careful. I love you. And father and son, we do when they're little, but later on when they get 20 plus years old, the I love yous kind of, they would slide away a little bit. And I was grateful. In fact, I spoke at the funeral how it could have been something different.
Yeah.
I could have said, no, you come straight home, but he was 22, and it could have been something different. It could have been something bad coming out of my mouth instead of saying I love you, And I was always grateful for that.
And that was the last conversation.
That was my last conversation with him. And it could have been something different.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful it wasn't. So.
That's pretty incredible, because I've even had other people share stories just about like some siblings and stuff that ended up passing away, and there were potential like fights right before and stuff. And even I look at our own situation, I could have, said some maybe not so nice things to Sonny. But I'm thankful for you, for your sake, that that's how it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of the other like cycles of grief or like stages of grief it talks about is like depression, where it's like that extreme sadness or for missing or longing for your child. Do you think you experienced any of those types of things?
I don't know that I've ever really thought about depression. There's times that I've thought, would he been married? He would have been married.
Yeah.
Would he, kids, grandkids. I love grandbabies, and I kind of we wonder about those days. But I don't go into depression, about that.
No, thank you.
What emotions did you experience in the weeks, months, years afterwards?
A good cry was good for me anytime. One of the things that I got hooked on right after that was the Tabernacle Choir.
Okay.
Or any good Christian music. But the Tabernacle Choir, I had like 10 albums of theirs, and I knew what song was next, and I would be out working and spraying and working by myself, and I would have them on my headphones, and I would just be singing and crying, and I'm sure that there were people in Sun City looking at me going, that guy is nuts. And I'd just be out there singing because I have motors running and everything, and I'd just be singing and crying and smiling and crying at the same time, and those were emotions that I think helped me deal with a lot of that. So
did you let some of your family, like your other kids and like your wife, see you cry also? Yeah,
like I said earlier that I was decorating the Christmas tree tonight, and here's all these ornaments. All the other kids, when they've left the house, they take their baby ornaments with them, and here I'm hanging Joel's ornaments and just crying and crying, and it's every year, It's not so much anymore, but for the first 15 years it was,
That's still a long time.
but they were they were joyful tears, just remembering him and having a good, a good time doing it, crying while I'm doing it, Mom going just over there shaking her head at me,
I don't know if mine right now I could say that I have any tears that are joyful or joyous. I still cry on a somewhat frequent basis based off of just everything. It's still pretty fresh and new for us though, but yeah.
My heart goes to you guys right now. It really does. And I think that's one of the emotions is my I'm a lot kinder to people now that might be facing a problem in their life. It's just and it's fun to talk to other people that are just as kind. I knew people that were crying for you that didn't even know you, and made me cry for you guys,
Yeah.
So
How's the loss of Joel impacted like your family life, or just the relationships that you have within your own family? So you and your wife, and also your kids, for the long term, like even all the way, we're now at almost, I think, 20 years since Joel passed away. So how has, through the 20 years, how has it kind of impacted your family relationships that you have?
Like I said, I'm a lot kinder guy. I'm quick to say I love you, and quick to heal any or to say I'm sorry, and I try not to be as ornery with my boys that I used to be. I'm pretty. I think I'm kind of a mellow guy. Well, some of them might not agree with me. But
Were you mellow before Joel's death?
I had a dream. Can I tell you of a dream?
Yeah.
Go for it.
I had a dream that I had died, and this was one of those dreams that I woke up in the
Is this
middle of the
before
night.
Joel died?
This was just right before Joel died.
Okay.
I had a dream that I died, and I'm up in the corner and I'm looking down at my funeral, and there's nobody there. And I woke up and I'm going, that was crazy. And as I evaluated that dream, and it was, what kind of a life am I living that nobody would show up at my funeral? And so I think sometimes I was a little bit more not as reserved as I should have been when I opened my mouth. I was pretty ornery sometimes. I was an old farm boy and worked in the oil field and drove truck, and I wasn't a very nice guy, sometimes. So.
And from that dream, did you try to
I
adjusting some
tried
stuff?
making changes in my life. And over the last 25 years or so, maybe 22 years or so, I think I've worked on it a lot better. So if I smash my thumb, you wouldn't think so, out there by myself. So.
It kind of goes in line with that, but kind of a follow-up is, were there any big turning points or changes that happened in your life due to the death of Joel?
Turning points or changes in my life?
Yeah. Where it shifted maybe like how you parented, or shifted how you interacted with people. Or just something that you were like, wow, and kind of like the dream that you had, but any continuation of that.
My belief in God changed from a superficial belief into the Holy Spirit talking to me.
Yeah.
And really changed my where I had talks with, not so much talks, but where he answered my prayers, and that changed. That started really changing me. Do
you feel like your relationship with God became better because of it?
It did. My relationship with God became exponentially greater.
Was it immediate?
Within months, it was. That's pretty quick.
Yeah.
So,
and you said, I think in your words were something like you went from like a superficial belief to then like a concrete belief, right? Whereas like you actually had a relationship or communication with God Within the time period of Joel's passing, did you question any of your beliefs?
I didn't. The spirit was so strong in our house. And I remember this young man coming there, one of Joel's friends, and he came up there and he knocked on the door, and this was about 8:00 at night. And I said, "Nathan, how you doing?" And I said, "Come on in." But I said, "Lisa's in bed, but come on in. But the spirit's really strong." I said, "If you want some, take out your pocket knife and cut a chunk out and take it with you." That's how I felt. That's how we felt. It was just, and people that would come over would go, "Wow." And it was just amazing. Ward members that would just come over our ward members, our congregation members, it was just amazing, their outpour of love to us. And there was no way that I could, so maybe it was guilt that I could never deny the love that was poured out to us, So I remember there was a lady, and as soon as she heard about this, she came over to the house and she just walked in. And there's, like I said, police and fire. And she just walked into the house. She looked around. She walked over to the kitchen sink, did the dishes, dried them, put them away, and walked out and left.
Wow.
Those are experiences. Those are things that you just can't. You fall in love with the people, and it happened multiple times. After the funeral one time, just another quick story. After the funeral, my family was all down, and Lisa's going, "Doug, I don't want to host people." And there was 50 people at the house, and there was some food there, and so I called my friend Matt Bullock, and he owned Streets in New York. I said, "Matt, I need some help with some food." I had no more blinked. And here they were delivering 15 or 20 pizzas at the house.
Wow.
Those are people that I love to this day. And those are just a fraction of it. Those are just a fraction of it. So.
That's one of the things that honestly overwhelmed me so much, was the amount of kindness and service that people gave us. Not anything I ever wanted. I don't know if you're this way, but I'm one that I just don't really want people to help me. But in that situation, like the lady that came and washed your dishes, or Matt bringing all those pizzas, I've experienced it where I was just in a place that there was so many other bigger things to worry about than like dirty dishes, or so many other things to worry about than like, where's the food coming from? Like there was so many other things that are so much more important on my mind, and like people just dropped everything to help us.
Yeah.
And it's overwhelming, the amount of kindness that was shown to us just by the small community that's around us here.
Yeah. So, those were things that that's why I could never say I'm not going to church tomorrow because these people were there, and I just had to go see them and say thank you. And it just, and my testimony just grew and grew of Jesus Christ more and more, and I would just be out working, and work was my form of release. So, and I had lots of work to do. And so that was kind of my outlet to just get up and go to work. It probably wasn't fair to my wife just to do that. But that's how I dealt with it.
on that level of like you and your wife, I'm just curious never mind. We'll talk about that in the couples one because I want to ask some questions there, but I think in the couples one, it would be better to ask that just so that you aren't like, what the heck are we going to ask? And then not be able to know. But I was going to ask.
So that you will remember it.
No, what I wanted to ask was like, did you ever tell your wife like, hey, you should be doing these things to try to like help cope? And you don't need to answer this. And then vice versa. Did she ever be like, hey, you need to maybe do this, this, and this, because you guys were like on drastically different paths. And so you could always look over at the other person and be like, maybe you should try X, Y, or Z. But I just think it's better when all of us are in the room and then we can all talk about that instead of right now. But
yeah, because I'll say no. I'll say I never did that, and she'll say you did. You know? And then, so that means I did.
Yeah.
So, you know, my fear of that was there was, I don't know what the statistics are of when you lose a child of divorces, it's really high.
It is really high. And I don't want to say the exact statistic because I don't have it. I'd have to look it up.
Your wife said 85%.
Your wife said 85. I've heard 85. I've heard 80. I've looked at other places and it was like different too. So honestly, I don't know like the accurate statistic of what it is, but I do know that it's relatively high. And the other thing is if your relationship's already not very good and then something like that happens, it's
right.
just it's like a bomb that got sent there. And then all of a sudden, whatever wasn't good before is still not good after a death happens.
Right.
And if anything, it puts a magnifying glass on that awful or bad thing that's in that relationship, which is why it's easy then, I think, to have a relationship crumble and fall.
Yeah. And so I don't know that I ever said anything like you should do that. That's kind of taboo words for us, for me to say
you
to
and
my
her
wife.
relationship?
For me to say to my wife anyway.
Yeah.
And so I didn't ever. And those divorce things gets in your mind, and you're going like, I don't want to even start crossing those boundaries there. To if you woulda, shoulda, coulda, you know, and so I tried not to. I kind of like my wife. So.
I think you more than just kind of like her, just to throw it out there.
Have you adopted any specific coping strategies, can't speak, to help you with, I know you said you went and kind of like work was kind of like probably like a good like coping kind of thing for you because you're able to have like a little release. Is there anything else? Like, did you ever do any therapy or?
I listened to Tabernacle Choir and sang and cried.
Kind of like a music therapy.
Yeah, it was my music therapy, you know. and so I didn't do anything else. So.
And you also you talked about though that you also liked just talking to people in general about Joel and about the situation.
Right.
And I think people probably
got tired. People probably got tired of listening to me because we'd get talking, you know, and I'd say, "Well, Joel and I, you know, we did this or this," you know, and people would probably rolling their eyes, and I was too oblivious to notice it. But
did you talk to other people kind of about your feelings about your relationship with him, or like your thoughts on the situation, or was it more just like memories of Joel that you kept talking about?
Yeah, probably more memories about Joel.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, that's probably what it was. It's more memories about him instead of. I don't think I expressed any regrets or anything to anybody about him. Just where we were, just the things that I remembered.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you still get that opportunity often to talk about him to people?
No, and we're coming up on the 20 years, and you start to other than decorating the tree, you know, or his birthday or the day that he died, you know, our life takes over, and it's not that you forget, but life takes over and you start to go on without them. And it sounds callous, doesn't it?
It's weird though, but life still just keeps going. We talked about it with your wife too, of you can't stop the clock. You just can't stop it.
Right.
The sun rises the next day. It just keeps going. So 1 year happens, and then 2 years going to happen, and it just keeps going. Time just keeps going forward. It just does. You can't stop it. You can't slow it down. There's nothing you can do about it. It just continues to just slowly, like a tank, just track through no matter what is happening. It's just going to keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when somebody loses a child, then it kind of opens your eyes again, and you feel for them. You remember all those feelings that you had, and in our little ward and group, I think there's 5 people that have lost children, and
does it bring back all the emotions of that same day when you found out that Joel died, or is it more like, oh my gosh, I'm so sad for you because I know kind of what you're going through?
That's generally what it is. Is that I'm sad for you. I'm sad for the Brazeltons or Christy, and just all those people. And you go, what can I do to alleviate some of their pain right now without being a burden on them, without trying to knock on the door and having to show up there? What can I do? What can I say? And I think that's kind of where we're at today, is how do we help out when something like that happens? Yeah.
You talked about just bringing relief to some people. You took me out to lunch. That was super nice. It was a good lunch.
Did I make you pay for it?
Just stuff like that is nice for me, because her and I are very different. I'd honestly would talk to anyone that wants to talk about Sonny and the death and the accident, and as much detail as you want to get into, I will give you as much detail. People wanted to come over, and I was like, sure, come over. And honestly, very similar to your guys' story, where like she would go up into the bedroom or whatever, and I would be willing to just talk to people. If people wanted to talk on the doorstep or wanted to come in the house or whatever they wanted to do, I was willing to talk to people, and that kind of like helped me. So in that, you were talking about just how you can help other people, and a shout out to you is that you definitely have helped me out, and just going to lunch and chatting about stuff was nice. Get your perspective and understand some of your story, and I thought it was awesome. Yeah. This next question kind of deals with just friendships and relationships in general that you had prior to Joel's passing, and then if his passing and some of the stuff impacted any of those relatives.
Relationships with Joel or with other people?
Just with other people. And the context for this, the reason why I even asked this question is because I've heard of some people that they have some friends that are unable to kind of like handle some of the trauma or some of the things that go on with a friend losing a child. And so those friends kind of, in some sense, kind of like diminish away or go away, right? So did you see any impact on like just friendships or relationships that you had based off of the fact that Joel died?
I think I became closer with most of my friends, and some of those that, and I can't name or think of any that maybe couldn't deal with that. I can't think of any, but most of my relationships with my friends are closer, much closer. I mean,
and why did they get closer?
Just because they would be there to talk to me, or I'd call them on the phone, and probably Brian Purdyman was my good friend. We would just, I could call him and just talk and cry, and I had those type of friends that I could do that to. My brother-in-law, Arlen, him and I could talk, and he wouldn't say a word, just listen, and so I think my relationships with people became closer.
And what about with even like your kids or your parents or siblings?
Well,
was there any impact on the relationships that you had in your family sphere?
other than I became a kinder dad,
Yeah.
and it said I love you a lot more than, and I still say it quite a bit. So, in fact, I probably say it way too much.
I don't know if you can ever say I love you too much, right?
Even our friends and, friends, high school guys, and I'll say, hey, I love you, guy, and it's just, I've kind of tried changing over life. So,
Where do you feel like you are now in your journey of healing?
see, I find myself getting a little harder again.
Do you?
With my family, I feel much closer to my family.
Yeah.
My grandkids and I mean, my grandson comes over and the shop is his. He can do whatever he wants in the shop, spend as much as he wants, and weld or melt solder, and solder's expensive, but he'll be melting it and just trying to make something or trying to weld something, and I'll show him how, and things that are just where I would have been a little bit shorter with the boys. With my grandson, I'm just, of course, I think that's the job of a grandparent too. So
I think some of that's time stuff too,
Yeah.
right? Because like with your kids, you're with them all the time or the majority of the time. As a grandparent, at least I assume as a grandparent, there are grandparents there that like essentially raise their grandkids and stuff. But I don't think that's something like with you, right? So you see them on a limited amount of time.
yeah,
And so I don't know. I definitely see that. I don't know if people are completely changed in the sense that they're like, I guess, more forgiving or more patient once they're older, or
Right.
it's just a time factor. Because there's days that I feel like I'm 100% like the most patient person ever. And then there's other days that with our kids, it's like, I've been with you so much and you're still acting this
Right.
way that I'm just like fed up with this. You know what I mean? And as a grandparent, it seems like you can just be like,
I'm going home now.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
Or you see them on that limited time. And so then you didn't have the 24 hours prior to all of the negativity or all bad things or whatever. And you just
Yeah.
get to fully invest in that love that you have for them.
One of the things that I did with our kids, it was a little different. They never played video games. We bought an Xbox one time. That tells you how long ago that's been, And I
What's an Xbox?
Yeah,
No, I'm just joking.
I don't think it ever hardly got played with, because what I bought for their birthdays and Christmases is welders and grinders and torches when they were just 8 and 9 years old,
Yeah.
and metal and stuff like that. So we did a lot of that together. So that was something they were always doing and making and stuff like that. So
I wish I knew how to weld better. I like barely know how to weld. So you might have to teach me how to weld.
yeah.
That makes me think of things to get for Tucker. I'd rather get him some welding equipment than
But you
some
have to
other
be out
stuff.
there with him, Dad.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. That's the whole thing.
So,
We talked about earlier coping strategies, we talked about earlier some just different coping strategies that maybe you have. Were there any that you wish you adopted sooner? So as an example, like if you could go back to yourself now that it's been 20 years, or even at year, 7, could you have gone back to yourself just right after Joel had died and been like, do this first, because that really helped you? Is there anything you wish you would have adopted sooner?
probably reading my scriptures with our family. I always said family home evening when I was a child was a fight that started with a prayer.
Yeah.
And so I didn't want family night, because it always, in my house, it always started with the prayer and it ended up into a big fight. And so we didn't have it very often. And I tried to get Lisa, let's not mess with that. If they want to watch TV before they go to bed, that's fine. Let's do their homework and avoid the fight.
Yeah.
And now as Bryce would say, every night is family home evening night. So, and we read our scriptures together and stuff like that. And I wish that I wish that I had spent more time with the kids reading their scriptures and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it was always there, but it was never really where we'd sit down and just on a regular basis read our scriptures and stuff.
Yeah. Or discuss or talk about what you had read. Yeah.
Just talking about the scriptures afterwards, or being able to have a family night without a fight, and just whether it's going to a movie and just being a part of a family and laughing and stuff like that. And I think we tried harder after Joel had passed away, and where we before I wasn't as. It might even be that Lisa took the kids and went and did something, and I wouldn't go, or I'd be working or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Yeah. And I can see how that would impact your family relationships. And one of the things you talked about in it is that you feel closer with your family since Joel's passing. And I think that probably has something to do with it too, is it probably changed a little bit of your priorities of where you thought, well, if the whole family's going to go do something, I probably should be there also, instead of I need to go do this, get one more job done or one more whatever.
Yeah, because it could be something else.
Yeah.
It could be something different.
Thank you to Doug for coming over and sharing his story with us tonight about his son Joel. And we are going to be talking to him and his wife as a couple. So if you would like to hear their story and how it impacted them as a couple losing Joel, please listen to that episode that's coming up next. Shine bright, and we'll see you in the next episode.